What's up, everybody? Jesse Ziegler here with Cycle News Magazine, and this is finally the Yamaha Tenere 700. We're out here in Spain. We came on the world launch for the European-based model, and here it is. It's finally here after seeing the T7 a couple years ago, and then the rally raid version that Yamaha teased through their ingenious marketing plan that had some of their celebrities and racers taking the bike to different destinations. Man, people have just been dying to ride this bike in the US, and I'm one of them. I look at adventure riding as a way to get on the dirt almost exclusively if I can, and have a nice big platform to connect more fun dirt. But for me, adventure riding really is about riding in the dirt, and this bike from concept forward really seemed to fit that bill. Obviously it was rally inspired, and a lot of things that I like about it is it harkens back to the history of Yamaha racing Dakar Rally and their successes there. If you're new to the Dakar Rally scene, you wouldn't realize that Yamaha was dominant in that for a very long time. In fact, the first Dakar Rally was won by Yamaha. So a lot of cool history in this name, a lot of cool stuff in this bike to talk about. We're gonna go over it pretty quickly because we just had about 400 kilometers of riding. We rode completely stock machines, stock tires. We didn't really touch a lot of the things or get anything modified. There was a couple of variations they had here in Spain, a rally version with a taller seat and an Akrapovic exhaust and some other bits and parts you can put on. Then they have like a globe-trotting version that has a lot of other knickknacks. But I stuck to the standard version, which we're gonna assume is gonna be similar to the bikes we're gonna get in the US. We don't really know yet. In fact, availability is still kind of a bummer for a lot of customers expecting this thing, because you're gonna probably see this bike in the second half of next year, making it a 2021 model. So expect to see this maybe midsummer, but maybe later than that. And the answers to that are still coming. Also, a big question mark is price. We don't really know how much it's gonna cost in the US, because there's certainly can be a lot of fluctuations in the way international business is done. In the meantime, final specs we're not so sure of either. We don't know, for instance, what tires it'll come with necessarily in the US. We certainly don't know if the suspension settings are going to be the same. We don't know if the engine output settings and the EFI settings will be the same for the US market. So really, we're testing a European model. This is going to be for sale here in Europe, manufactured in Europe, and let me tell you about it. The Tenere 700 was just incredibly fun and an incredible pleasure to ride. It's got the CP2 engine, pulled out of, straight pulled out of the MT-07 bike, which has been a really big street favorite for a lot of times. 698cc parallel twin, makes really great torque, super fun. They've modified the EFI and the torque settings inside the engine electronically to flatten the torque curve even more. So at lower RPM, you have that nice torque to get you out of corners. And it seems to over rev really well still. So it's not just a bottom end motor, all torque. It's got really good over rev. The RPMs really climb fast and the bike pulls really good. So clearly, like, the first shining point anybody's gonna see or experience when they ride this bike is the beauty of that engine. It's just really easy to ride. It's not intimidating. It's got a really great planted feel. It delivers tons of traction. And man, there's just nothing you can say bad about that engine right now. The next thing is the chassis. It's a tubular steel chassis. It's got this engine is a stressed member, so the down tubes that you see on the bike are actually more for protection than frame strength. And it's really comfortable. It doesn't quite look like the T7 rally bike with the flat seat and the little tank and the big rally fairing, just like a Dakar bike, but honestly, if you rode that bike in that configuration for a long time, it'd be pretty uncomfortable. You'd be stuck out in the wind, you'd be super high. Seat height's right at about 34.5, 35 inches, depending on your seg setting and how much breakfast you had. It honestly feels kind of low for a standard adventure bike. It's gonna be super comfortable in the showroom when people sit on this bike, but when you're riding around, your seat to the foot peg distance is a little cramped. We actually rode the accessory seat, which is a taller, flatter seat, and it's much more comfortable when you're riding around on the bike. It does lift the seat height quite a few millimeters, but it's kind of worth it for the on-road comfort. All right, frame's great. It's really stable. Seems to not have any excessive flex. The bike stays straight when you start pounding through some whoops or hit. We hit a lot of water bars on the roads today. The roads we rode on were mostly two-track or just like a single lane dirt road. Not a lot of single track, nothing too rough, nothing too aggressive, nothing moto style, but general commuting dirt roads, you know, that you would ride in the US. No sand hoops, no deep sand really, just some loose sand on top of some hard pack. And the chassis was planted the whole time. It's got a pretty steep raked out front end, so it has a really light feel on the front. Plus it has a, you know, like a 48-52 rear biased weight balance. So you really feel like your rear end is stuck to the ground, getting a lot of good traction, and the front end is basically free to bounce and move around. And then if you want it to stick, you can apply some pressure on it and use that front end to turn around the corners. We felt probably could use a little more front tire pressure. We adjusted the preload on the rear shock, tried to bring it up a little bit because it did feel a little low, and that seemed to help a little. Again, there's a lot of clickers and a lot of adjustments we can make on that. 2 days of riding, we kind of just stuck to it and wanted to feel what the bike was like. Electronics is a big topic in adventure bikes, and this one basically leaves them all off the table. This comes back to the time when motorcycles were manipulated with throttle control by the right hand and the clutch of the rider, because this one doesn't have any. It has no throttle control, has no rider assistance other than a standard on-road ABS setting that you can turn on or off when you go off-road. That's it. There's no traction control, there's no cornering ABS, there's no torque control, there's no any of the other controls that are inside all the other systems on most high-end adventure bikes. They're just not on this bike. And for a lot of people, that's probably going to be a positive, because it means you have nothing to worry about. It's a pretty simple motorcycle with pretty good performance, so something you can take as a travel partner, and you're going to be able to use it in remote areas, worry-free that, you know, a system's not going to fail on you, because those systems just don't exist. The braking package, since we're talking about brakes, it's got Brembo calipers, front and rear. It's got dual fronts. It's got a single rear. The rear has a Brembo master cylinder, and the front has a sort of Brembo branded, but looks sort of like a stock Yamaha-ish master cylinder. The brakes are an area we feel like it could probably use some improvement when we see it in the US. They're just not as strong as we like in our adventure bike, especially for off-road when we start going downhill and you really want to feel that front end work. And the rear was more like on-off switch. It kind of just didn't have a lot of feel, and then it would lock up and then the bike would be going sideways by you. So we'd like a little more progression, a little more strength overall in the brakes. We'd like a little stiffer suspension setting, but for an adventure bike, we're not going to be jumping it much more than we were jumping it today. And yeah, we bottomed it out, but we expect to do that on adventure bikes. It's kind of an early warning signal that you're probably going too fast and you're probably about to get some flat tires. The last part of the electronics package, it does come with a 12-volt power outlet stock, which is super cool because everybody's got a GPS or a phone on their thing. And it has a handy dandy little gauge up here that shows quite a bit of information. It's got average fuel consumption, immediate fuel consumption. It has a couple trip meters, overall odometer, has a really cool digital tach that kind of goes up the side. Then it has a couple lights for low fuel, and a couple of those other indicator lights, low oil, stuff like that. Simple controls, since there is no menu to cycle through to get any ABS or traction control other settings. There's just one button on there you push, turn off the ABS, hold it down. Manual clutch, cable clutch, seems a little basic and old-fashioned, but it honestly was a very solid part of the ride. The clutch engagement was really good. It never faded on us, even if we were going slow through the slippery rocks. And we use that a lot, like we said, because there is no traction control to control the slip on the rear tire. So as far as the clutch goes, I'd keep it the way it is. I wouldn't adjust that at all. The foot pegs they come with the rubber grips for on-road use. They cut down some vibration, but the bike really doesn't vibrate that much. It's got a really smooth feel to it, so it's not going to have a thumping feel or a really bad vibration. We'd like the foot pegs to be a little longer away from the bike because the clutch on the CP2 motor does stick out a little bit, and when you stand up it kind of pushes your legs out. Let's go back to the looks a little bit. Yeah, the T7 looked definitely extreme. Definitely looked like a rally bike they picked up out of Dakar and we're gonna give to the consumers. This bike loses a little bit of that because the reality of an actual fuel tank that actually has decent capacity to get people around somewhere came into play. The seat height has to be at a certain level so consumers can sit on it. But I think what they nailed it on is the rally fairing setting. This is a fiberglass composite bolt-on assembly that bolts all the way back to the frame underneath the tank, and it's a solid one piece. It's so solid that it actually causes the little computer to vibrate around independently from it, but the actual cage around it is a really great piece. It offers pretty good wind protection. You know, we were riding in moto gear with open face helmets and goggles, and we were getting some wind and bugs in our face, but that's to be expected on this kind of bike, I think. The really cool 4 LED headlight looks awesome, and it has an indicator light underneath it, so it actually has 4 LEDs and then this cool stripe LEDs underneath it. So coming at you, this bike just looks great. It comes in 3 different colors in Europe right now: a black, this blue standard, and then a really great looking competition red, it's called, with red and white mixed. In the end, I think this bike is going to be a really good adventure option for people either in the market now with a bigger, heavier bike that they're kind of intimidated by, or coming into the market and they're afraid to jump up to, you know, a bike that has 100 and 100 plus horsepower. This bike's easy to touch the ground on. It's very easy to control. You don't have to learn any rider aid systems or how to manipulate them or remember to turn them off because they just don't exist. True, that makes it a little bit sub-premium in the offering, but I think the price is going to reflect that when it comes in the United States. I think it's going to be at a price point where people are going to say, man, that's a really good deal for a motorcycle that can take me anywhere I want to go in the world, but I'm going to sacrifice losing some of these electronic aids in the process. And, you know, that's probably going to be a sacrifice that they're okay making. So, all in all, we can't wait to get it in the US and ride it against the other adventure bikes in the class. That's pretty much what everybody wants to know, is how this thing's going to stack up against KTM 790s, BMW 850s, even, you know, Honda Africa Twin in that category, just because it seems to have like that sort of mix of affordability and accessibility wrapped around it. And right now what we can tell you in a comparison sense is not a lot, because we just don't have the bikes together. We're excited to try them out next to each other, and we're excited to ride this some more, and we're pretty sad we're going home because we want to keep riding it. We love it. So thank you, Yamaha, for having us out to Spain. Look for more in the magazine and online. Thank you.